So I want to share with you today something that's dear to my heart, a scripture that I love to read, the Sermon on the Mount, as it comes to Matthew's Gospel. Now I want you to think about, it seems like every generation that we find ourselves in, that there is a new word of slang or an idiom that comes around that every generation creates for itself. It's there and then it pretty well passes, right? I mean, some of you, let's see if you remember this, that if you, back in the 1930s, and you were surprised by something and you would say, well, I'll be a monkey's uncle. Any of you remember that? You're going to date yourself. Don't say it too loud. And then I think it was back in the 60s where people were going around saying things like, that's groovy. Or they would say, far out, man. Or they would say, I got to get me a job because I need to make me some, what? Bread. Right? And then there's been something I think it's always been around, a saying that teenagers have always said, and I still hear it occasionally, and we all say it as people, but teenagers really have a way of saying it, and the word simply is seriously, as in sarcastically. Seriously? I can't go out tonight before I clean the kitchen? Seriously? I have to do my own laundry from now on? Well, I thought of that idiom, that word, when I was thinking about our scripture, reading on the Sermon on the Mount. And I kept reading, I kept thinking, seriously, Jesus, is this what you really want us to do? Are you real? Jesus said, if someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek. Whoa. If someone wants something from you, give it to them. Don't refrain from loaning something to anyone who asks of you. Now, bankers, any bankers here? How do you fit that into your business plan? And, you know, someone said, if someone wants to sue you and take your coat, I want you to also just take off and give them your shirt as well. Love your enemies. Pray for those people who persecute you. And I think, seriously? Are you for real? And Jesus finishes his section of his sermon up, the Sermon on the Mount, by summarizing it with that last verse. You must be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Let us all say together, Jesus, seriously? Really? To live without error, not to make a mistake. Now, I understand that we could be perfect in our intentions. The Apostle Paul was perfect in his intentions. He said to us, oh, the good things that I would have myself do are the very things I find myself not doing, and those bad things I would never do are the very thing I find myself doing. Oh, woe is me. Oh, God. Help me. Who will save me from this wretched man that I am? Now, the other part of this is we can't be perfect in our intentions. We can in our intentions, but we can't in our real life. But I'm not sure we really want to be perfect. Do any of you really want perfection? You ever been to the home of someone who was the perfect housekeeper? You know, everything on every table is perfectly arranged. You can go like this on every table and there's not a speck of dust on your finger. They've got a beautiful white carpet because they keep everything so nice. They've got a white couch and they give you a glass of red wine. And you're sitting here and you're sitting at by the couch and you're holding it down because you're afraid you'll accidentally knock it over. Do you have any fun when you go to the house of a perfect housekeeper? I don't think so. I had a fraternity brother, his 7 brothers and sisters, all of them went to MIT or Harvard eventually, including he and his brother who were in my fraternity. Senior year, we all saw him crying, and we said, "What's going on?" He said, "I made a B+." And we're all sitting here thinking, "Oh, woe is me. We feel such sympathy for you." "Well, none of my brothers and sisters have ever made a B+. I said, "Well, welcome to humanity in the real world." I'm not sure we even want to be perfect. I'm not sure if we tried our best we could be perfect. But how oftentimes in our life do we feel like we somehow have got to be perfect in what we do or be close to perfect? You know, you want to be the perfect parent. You want to be the perfect mother or father, and you're so worried that other people perceive you as somehow inadequate. If your kid has a problem or something's not going right and it becomes public, you're so embarrassed because you think it might reflect on you, and you worry about them as well. But gosh, what did I do? What did I fail? Or you have a week and you've really struggled all week, and you're stressed out at work and things aren't going well there, and you know, you come home and things are a mess, and you get all mad at your children, and you yell and you scream. You say things, "Oh, I can't believe I said that to my one that I put before my own life. How could I do that?" And some of you go to work and you've got jobs and you're in a competitive place and you've got a lot of people around you doing maybe some of the same things you do, and you think, you know, if I don't do it as well, or at least but probably better than they do it, is my job going to be at stake? And you live that stress to the point that when you go on vacation, maybe you don't even take vacation. Maybe they give you 3 weeks of vacation, but you don't take very much of it. And I know people like this because why? Somebody else is not taking it. They're working harder than I am. And when you do go on vacation, you sit around the pool and you open up the laptop. Kids are in the pool. "Come on, Dad, hop in the pool. I know I got some work to get done. I got some emails to respond to." Because you live with that fear that if I'm not good enough, I may be in trouble. And here we hear Jesus saying to us, "You must be perfect." What are we to do with this? Now, the Christian church has struggled with this for a very long time. Over 2,000 years, they've struggled with this verse. And they have a lot of answers that they've come up with. Someone said, well, really what's going on here, Jesus doesn't expect us to be perfect in this life. It's in the next life that we're going to be made perfect. God's going to make us all perfect. Don't you just love that? I don't have to do a thing. God's going to make it all happen for me one day. Some people have said, well, Jesus is just using hyperbole. You know what hyperbole is. It's exaggeration. He uses it in other places clearly when he says if your right hand or left hand, I forget which it is, calls you to sin, cut it off. He doesn't really mean that, right? Or only a rich person can't get, it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle. Really? Maybe that's what he's doing here. Catholic Church, for the longest time, said, well, you know, we regular Christians just can't be perfect because we live in compromising situations. We're so much a part of the world, there's no way to be perfect. But we reserve that for the monastics who can pray and separate themselves from the world and achieve perfection for the rest of us. Now, Protestants will say, traditionally, when they've looked at this verse, they've said, well, what's really going on is Jesus wants to set the standard high to let us know that we're all sinners because we can't live up to it. And maybe when we realize we can't be that, we will turn to God and ask God's mercy and grace because we're not saved by our works. We're saved by faith alone in God's goodness and forgiveness. And so that's how Protestants, isn't it interesting? When we have a theology, we come to the Bible, and that's exactly what we find in the Bible. But is that what Jesus is really saying here? I don't think so. If you simply look at the text, now I realize I'm not a Greek scholar myself, And I would say, look it up in the commentary. Well, you don't have to. I don't have commentaries, but you don't have to. You can go online. Look up the word that's translated perfect. It's a Greek word, teleos. And it can be translated perfect, but that's not the perfect translation. A better translation of that verse is, you must be complete. You must be whole. You must be mature. Now, that is something we can achieve, maturity, right? I mean, it is possible to do as Jesus said, to turn the other cheek. There are people who have done that. Some of you have prayed for your enemies, no doubt. Some of you, I had a friend once, a priest, and he was studying to get his PhD, one of my good friends, and every time I said I liked something, next thing I knew it was at my doorstep, and I began to realize he had some kind of discipline that if anyone wanted something of his, he was not going to be attached to it. He'd give it away. I had to watch what I said. But, you know, you can let go of things and give to the one who would take your coat and go ahead and give him your shirt. It's possible you do those things because you can become mature. And Jesus is talking about stretching our boundaries. Now, the New English Bible has the best translations, a bit loose. It's taken to the account of the scripture that it's reading, which is about expanding our boundaries, and it translates this verse, you must set no boundaries on your love, even as your Father in heaven sets no boundaries on his love. And I like that, because that's something I can grow into. My preaching professor, one of my preaching professors, a wonderful preaching professor, his name was Fred Craddock. Fred Craddock was a very gifted professor, and he was very good at telling stories. And one of the stories he told with us was when he was early in ministry. He was at a little church up in the Appalachian Mountains of Tennessee, and his church people said, "Now, pastor, preacher, we want you to go out and visit this older lady. She's out on the edge of town, up on the hill here, and she's very poor, and she doesn't come to church. Why don't you evangelize and see if you get her to come to church?" And he said, "Well, okay, I guess that's what else am I going to do today?" So they drove up, walked up the hill, looked at that old beaten up, broken house. It was made out of wood that hadn't been sanded. You know what I mean? Lumber, straight out lumber. It looked like it had holes in it. The roof didn't look very good. Walks into the place and looks around and sees the furniture. It's all made of rough lumber, and there's an old bed there, an old metal rusted bed with rusted springs. You can see them. They're all exposed, and there's some old stuffed mattress, no telling what it's been stuffed with. And there sitting on that mattress is an older woman, and she looks like she's wearing a dress that's so big it's like a tent. It's an old print dress that's been worn out, and it's got little holes in it. And she's got, her hair is like sticks in a vase, sticking up. And he looked closely at her, and her lower lip was sticking out because she had some snuff in there, and it was dripping down her chin. Well, he thought to himself, this is going to be one of my shorter visits. And he was there, and he said a few words about his church, hope she comes to church. As he walks out, makes his way to the door, and he's close to there, he looks down, and a car's pulled up down there by his car, and out from that car, a door swings open, and a little girl, she's about 5 or 6 years old, she's dressed just beautifully, she's got beautiful blonde hair, with a ribbon in her hair. She comes running up, runs right past him as if he does not exist, over to the grandma, jumps in her lap, and kisses her on the lip and says, "I love you, Grandma." And Fred said, "Well, I just decided she wasn't someone worth me talking to. I was getting out of there as fast as I could because I let her appearance and my judgments about her choose whether I was going to include her as someone who deserved my attention and love." Now, we all do that. Every single one of us does that. We make judgments all the time, just in our daily life, about people, and we assume things. And we take those judgments, and sometimes we turn them into labels, and we label people. And once we label people, you know what you can do when you label someone? You can dismiss that person as someone you have any responsibility. Well, she's one of those. He's one of those. And when you do that, you missed out on the gospel. You may say, well, you know, he's a Trumper. Or you may say, she's a liberal Democrat. Or he's that one who drives that big old truck. I bet he's a redneck racist. Or he's driving that white Tesla out there. He's an urbanite snob who looks down on the rest of us. Or she's one of those weird people who wants us to call her they or him they. Or he's one of those white, privileged, bigoted sexists, I bet. He just looks like it. Well, that lady, she's been there every day sitting there begging with that sign. She just needs to get out and get a job. We make those judgments so flippantly, so quickly. It's our human nature, perhaps, to do that. But what do we do with that? How well do we really know that person that we make those judgments and put those labels? Have we walked in their shoes for one step? And Jesus says, you must draw no boundaries as God draws no boundaries. Then he says, God does what? God lets the rain, the good sunshine fall on the fields of the just, but also the unjust. Well, that's no way to do it, God. I mean, you should do it differently. You ought to let that rain and that nice sunshine fall in the field of all those good people right there on the boundary line, and let it be arid, dead vegetation on the other side, because the unjust people will get the message if you do it that way, right? Oh, they'll learn a lesson. But that's not how God does it. God says, Jesus says, God lets the rain and the sunshine fall on everyone's field, regardless of whether they are just. Because that's the nature of a loving God. You know, there's one of my favorite quotes. It's by Henry Longfellow Long. He said, if we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should find in each life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility. Take that to heart. What would it do to really allow ourselves to know that there's pain and suffering beyond what we can possibly know about any of the people we judge? So this is what Jesus is teaching us this morning in the Sermon on the Mount. It's nothing to love those who love you. Even pagans do that. But mature love, full love, expands that boundary beyond the self. Now, I don't know you very well, but school's just started. And I know my kids both have homework now. So I think it's only fair that the adults get some homework. And I have a homework assignment for you. I would invite you this week and next, well, for the next month, let's say, I'd like you to check your judgments. Notice that they're going to come. It's okay. Let the judgment come. Have your judgments about the people you meet. And then say, wait a second. This is a child of God. I don't really know this person. And give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt. I'm not asking you to like them. I'm not asking you to agree with them. In fact, Jesus vehemently stood against people who oppressed people. Didn't mind standing and speaking the truth. But he understood the pain. And he reached out to the Pharisees that he had problems with, because he was a loving person as God loved. So I'd like you to check your judgments, and I'd like you, when you find opportunity, and it will come to you if you're listening for it, Find a person, maybe there's something about them you want to judge and dismiss them. Find a way to talk to them. Maybe they've got opinions you don't agree with. And sit there and say, now, I may not agree with you, but I'd like to know more about why you think that. Could you help me understand why it's important for you to think as you do? And you may say, I may never agree with you, but I'd just like to get to know where you're coming from because I don't really understand it. And guess what? When you do that, sometimes doors open. Had a man, a friend of my wife's, significant other, an older man, came to visit. And we had him for dinner. You know, he's a very conservative man about a lot of things. And he sat down there, and he did that for me. He just started, tell me, I know you're a little bit more progressive and liberal than I probably am. I'm out from the countryside. Tell me why you think the way you do about this. And what do you think is the core problem that causes things? And then I did the same thing for him. He let my guard down, and next thing we know, we're just enjoying being with each other, even though we have all kind of differences. He's just a lovely human being, like me. So set no boundaries on your love. Even your Father in heaven sets no boundaries on his love. This verse, it may change your life if you put it into practice. Amen.